Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we are doing another single brewer review, and this is an IPA review. We are moving over to Rogue Ales. They are based out of Newport, Oregon. Two different IPAs. The first is Outta Line. This is a West Coast style IPA, which I'm particularly excited about as that's my absolute favorite style of IPA. This one clocks in at 6.9% ABV. And then number two is simply named 6 Hop IPAs. So I know it's got 6 different hop varieties, all sourced from their own Rogue Farm, hop farm. 6.66% ABV on this one. Now, admittedly, I wasn't able to find exactly which specific hop varieties were used in this one or in this one, but I will add in the comments later if I can find it listed anywhere. I didn't see it on their website. I'm sure somebody probably knows it online, but I didn't find it to be able to tell you the specific hops. So it's ought to be fun and exciting because I don't even know what to expect, not knowing what hops are in here. But I'm really excited. I absolutely love IPAs. Been a long time since I've had some Rogue Ales, and I'm really anxious to jump in and see what these two are about. So we're going to do exactly that. Starting with the Outta Line, this is their West Coast style IPA, 6.9% ABV. Okay, so starting off with our first beer, this is Outta Line. This is the West Coast style IPA, 6.9% ABV. So it's sitting right in kind of the high middle range of ABVs. West Coast style are definitely my favorite of IPAs, and as a rule, they tend to be the most bitter subcategory of IPAs. They use a lot more high alpha acid hops, which is the main reason that IPAs are so bitter. The alpha acids are what produce the bitter sensation on our taste buds. Typically, they can run the gamut. Floral, kind of fruity, citrusy, pine, resin, anywhere in between, earthy. So you never really know what you're going to get, but their common trait is they tend to be higher in IBUs, International Bitterness Units, and have a far greater bitter forward flavor on the palate. So I'm really excited to jump in this one. I have never had this beer. It's got a line of penguins on it, and one is breaking out of the line with a jetpack. So he's the rogue penguin in the bunch. Pardon my terrible pun. But let's get this cracked and pour it straight into the glass. All right. It's got a more caramelly hue to it, to be certain. Slosh it down the middle, give it a chance to form a good head. All right. Yep, that looks pretty good. Yep, it's pretty much a nice clear IPA as expected. It's West Coast style. It's not going to be hazy. It is a darker amber hue, so it's a little harder to see light through, but it looks like it has very, very fine carbonation bubbles coming up, and probably one of the reasons it created such a lush, pillowy head there. That's a nice looking head, and it's holding well. It doesn't have a lot of breakaway, so I expect it to retain pretty well. Let's give this one a sniff. It smells like a mix of sweet caramelly malt, but with the hops as the dominant aroma, and it's kind of a mix of a citrusy and a florally aroma that comes through. It's not super pungent. You really got to get down in there. But it's a nice mix. It smells quite sweet, quite caramelly, with a nice mix of citrus and floral hop aromas all mixed in. And it's relatively even, but the hops kind of override the caramel and the kind of malty sweetness that's below it. So it's about 60-40 ratio hop to caramel malt and the malt sweetness that you get through on the aroma. But it smells great, albeit not super pungent, but let's jump in and see what this one's about. Okay. Interesting for West Coast style IPA. And it's interesting because this is really not that overtly hop forward, nor is it that overtly bitter. It's a certainly more bitter forward than your average standard IPA, But if they didn't tell me this was supposed to be a West Coast style IPA, I never would have guessed it. It's a bit tame, being perfectly honest, for a West Coast style IPA. It's about as bitter as a run-of-the-mill standard IPA. It's not. It doesn't taste like it has that many IBUs. Not that that's really an indication. IBUs, international bitterness units, that's kind of the standard measurement of bitters on a scale. But bitter is all about perception. So you could be drinking a beer that says it's 250 IBUs, but it could taste not bitter to you at all, just based on the balance of malt and everything else that's in it. And subsequently, you could be drinking one that's 20 IBUs, but could taste super bitter just based on the balance of the other traits of the beer. This being a deep, rich caramelly and kind of a caramel forward malt backbone, I suspect is drowning out that West Coast edge. It's more palatable. This is one I think would be more approachable to more people, but if you're looking for a big, deeply bittered, hop pungent forward West Coast style, classic West Coast style, you might be disappointed by this one. It's not a bad beer, but it's tame for West Coast style. I'm gonna jump in another sip here. The body is medium heavy, 6.9% ABV, you kind of expect. That's a good amount of fermentables. It's got a little viscosity to the mouthfeel. It's a little bit creamy. It's kind of a mix of a little creamy and a little viscous, but not overtly so in either realm. And mixing with a medium heavy body, it does help the flavors stick around the palate. Now the malts that you smell on the nose don't really come through that heavily in the beer. It is hop dominant, albeit not pungently bitter. You get the flavor of earthy hops and maybe a little hint of citrus and a little hint of floral that comes through. It's more citrus than tropical fruit that I'm tasting. Maybe a hint of orange. It's hard to place because the earthy bitter profile is the dominant one. It's good. It's reasonably well balanced. For a standard IPA, I would say it's exceptionally well balanced, particularly considering the malt selection. For a West Coast style, I think it's on the weaker end, but it's a good beer. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, come up with my scores. When we come back, we will get on to our second beer. That is the 6 Hop IPA at 6.66% ABV. Okay, moving on to our second beer of today's Rogue Ales IPA review. We have got their 6 Hop IPA. That is the name of the beer. It is 6.66% ABV. They were quite precise with their number there. I did state this prior. I looked on the can, I looked on the website. I couldn't find exactly what blend of hops they use in this. If I can find that somewhere, I will put it down in the comments because with IPAs, I really do like to know what the hop bill is because the individual hops and the balance and amounts that they use are really what helps define and create the different, vastly different realm and range of aromas and flavors and bitterness in an IPA. So having an understanding of what specific variety was used gives you a really good baseline for if you're exploring different IPAs. Oh, I like that hop character. I like that one. I dislike that one. What do I like about that? What does it do aroma-wise, flavor-wise? How does it affect the bitters? It's all really important, particularly for the style, in my opinion. So I do want to find and locate that information. If I do, I will put it down in the comments. In terms of art, really basic. It's a green can, 6 Hop IPA. It's rather color appropriate. And it's got some hops going around in a circle, 6 to be precise. And indeed, it's actually making the number 6 out of the 6 hops. And these were all sourced from their own farm where they grow their hops. Nonetheless, let's get this one cracked. Got to be quick here. I've had some very, very active beers as of late, and I keep spilling them all over my table. Luckily, that was all predominantly, well, all entirely head foam, so I kind of got a sense of the beer, but without getting a mouthful. It's a whole lot of air, as you well know, that's in the head, so I got a taste, but not a full proper. Okay. Holding it up to the light, this is an IPA that is in the kind of caramelly color realm appearance-wise. It's a little darker than the norm, much more akin to what you might expect to see in an Imperial IPA, but it's still a very lovely beer. Due to the caramel nature, it's not cloudy, but it does make it difficult to see daylight purely through it. So it doesn't look clear, although it is a clear beer. I don't see any floating sediment in this at all. It's just harder for the light to get through once it gets that deeper caramel range of IPA color versus the lighter golden color. Looks great. I can see it is quite effervescent, and it's tricky to tell, but it looks predominantly like it's quite fine, small carbonation bubbles that are coming up. So I am sure that that helped generate this lush, creamy head. And I really don't see but minimal signs of this head even breaking away. So this ought to have really good head retention as well. Let's jump in, give it a sniff. That's got a really nice aroma. It smells very hoppy. It smells very hop forward. And really, it smells like a mix of citrus and floral. That's the aromas I'm getting out of the glass at any rate. While it does have a nice hop aroma, it's not ridiculously pungent, which, 6 hop IPA, I kind of expect it'll be bigger in the hop forward nature. But again, this head is so thick and pillowy, I am sure it's making it a challenge for the aroma to rise up out of the glass. Once this head retention starts to break down, I bet that the aroma is going to come through quite more pronounced than it is now. But you can smell it. It smells great. It doesn't smell boozy. And in tandem with the hops, you can actually still smell the malt backbone, and it does smell caramelly, which kind of matches the color. So I have an idea of what to expect. I do expect that they use quite a lot of caramel malts in this. There's usually a blend of different malts, but looks like they went for a deeper, richer, more caramel forward. So, you know, much like with Imperials, the caramel malts can often overshadow and overpower the hop bitterness due to their flavor pungency, but we'll see. We'll see how balanced this is. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Oh, that's nice. Yes, that's very nice. That's a very nice IPA. Okay. So I'm pleased to tell you that although it does have caramel malts, it at least appears to have caramel malts. Could be amber, but looks like a mix of at least some caramel in there. That really just imparts aroma. It doesn't actually come through in the flavor. The caramel doesn't override the hop. The hop is the star of this beer, I am pleased to report. The flavor profile of the hops that come through, it's a mix of earthy and a little bit of pine. I don't really taste any citrusy, even though I got that on the aroma. It really must be hops used for aroma. Maybe they dry hop to add the aroma, but that's not what they got into the actual flavor of the beer. It's earthy and just a little bit of pine. So maybe some Simcoe in there, maybe some Magnum. I'm not really sure. There's plenty of varieties, though those would be two of the most common to impart that kind of pine and resinous hop nature to it. I'll jump back in for body, but I could tell you that this mouthfeel is ridiculously creamy. It's just silky, silky smooth. I had an idea it might be due to how fine the effervescence and how active it was, but I was spot on. That's exactly how it comes through in the glass. It could easily have come off of a tap. It's so creamy. Jump back in for body and explore how this finish develops for you. The body is medium heavy. It's robust. It's got real substance to it. First thing immediately when you get this beer in your mouth is you get this brightness, and then within the first second, it's all about the hop. The bitters just come straight through to the forefront. And for me personally, as a hop head, as a lover of West Coast style IPAs in particular, this is exactly what I go for in an IPA. And IPAs run the gamut. It's these days there's so many sub-styles and different variations on how they're done. You never really know what you're going to get. So anytime I get a really hop forward, flavorful IPA, I am always, always thrilled because I am a massive hop head. I love the bitters, I love the aromas, I love the flavors. It's really the only beer style, with few exceptions, where you can get those qualities in a beer. It's one of the things that makes the style so unique in the realm of beers. And this one is an absolute home run. This is a fantastic IPA. If you like standard IPAs, if you like the New England, the thicker, sweeter, with the lactose added, you probably won't go for this if you don't care for the bitters, because it is very bitter forward. It is rather hop intense. But if you like a standard IPA or the bigger, heavier, bitter, more hop forward IPAs, you're absolutely going to love this one. I'm going to jump back in just to really get this finish. I mentioned how it starts, but I got off on a tangent and my mind went elsewhere. I apologize. The malt and the sweetness, then bam, it's hop. It's bitters, bitters, bitters. Earthy, it's probably 90% earthy to 10% just a twinge of pine in the back. No citrus comes through at all. No floral comes through at all. There's no tropical fruit. It's earthy with a little bit of pine back. And it just keeps growing in intensity. And then once it hits the apex of the intensity of flavor, kind of the balance between the earthy and the pine, the gap closes, so it comes closer to about 60-40 earthy to pine, and the pine really comes to the forefront. And I love that hop flavor trait combination. Earthy paired with pine and resinous is just a fantastic, fantastic hop flavor combination for my money. And the bitters just keep getting more intense, and it really lingers. It's not a viscous mouthfeel, but it's very creamy and rich, and it's very wet. So it does stick all around the palate, and it's clear that they use big, high alpha, high lupulin containing hops here, because the bitters are intense and they really do stick around the palate. Alpha acids tend to have that trait. They do stick around the palate, so you just keep getting lingering bitters and just that hop bite. And in tandem with the bitter sensation, you can keep tasting that earthy and that pine character to the hops. It's just absolutely fantastic. Honestly, it's been a long time since I've had some rogue ales, and this one is a real winner. If you like big, bold, hop-forward IPAs, you're absolutely going to love this one. I'm going to take my sweet time sipping on this, enjoying every last drop while I come up with my scores, and when we come back, we will get both beers ranked from top to bottom. Okay, now that we've gotten to enjoy both of these beers, we're going to go through and get them ranked, starting with the Outta Line. This is the West Coast style IPA, 6.9% ABV on this one, slightly higher than the other. Again, Rogue Ales is based out of Newport, Oregon. So starting with the aroma on this one. The aroma on this one was nice, but it wasn't particularly pungent. It was kind of high end of average, and that's exactly where I ranked it. I gave it a 6. The taste on this. This was a nice beer. It was a nice IPA, but the hops didn't have nearly enough presence. And really, if you're making a West Coast style, that's the biggest, boldest, most hop forward, bitter forward subgenre of the IPA category that there is. And this one just fell short of that mark. I gave it high end of average because it was good. It just wasn't intense enough. I gave it a 6. Body on this one. Excellent body. For 6.9% ABV, there's a lot of fermentables in there, and it's kind of getting in the high middle range of your average IPA, but it definitely had some substance. I only docked 1 point there. I gave it a 9 for the body. Mouthfeel on this one. The mouthfeel was nice. It was creamy enough, but not like fresh off of a tap creamy, and it really didn't have enough viscosity to help the hop characteristics and oils and acids stick around the mouth. It still felt nice, but there was a lot about it that could have been better. I gave it above average. I gave it a 7. The finish on this one. The finish on this beer was nice, but again, for a West Coast style IPA, they have some of the longest finishes of any beer style because they are so hop intense and there's so many alpha acids. They just stick around the palate and linger and just extend that finish so long. This did okay. It was certainly above average, but not upper echelon. It gets a 7. Head and retention on this one, it was fantastic. Had a very, very lush, creamy head that really had good staying power. It did collapse a little bit quicker than I thought it would. So the retention side of it, I had to dock a point, but I only took one because overall, being poured at home, it did a fantastic job. It gets a 9 out of 10. Appearance-wise, it was a nice looking beer. It was certainly kind of in that caramel threshold and a bit on the darker end. It really had a lot more in common visually with an Imperial than a standard IPA. They tend to be a bright yellow with just hints of gold. This was very much caramel in appearance. But, you know, it's still within the style, though it's not the norm. I gave it the high end of average. I gave it a 6. Balance on this. This was a very well-balanced beer. The hops and the malt each played their part, and none of them really overshadowed the other, which in an IPA, that's not necessarily a good thing, as you know my thoughts and opinions, especially if you're doing a West Coast IPA. There's nothing wrong with having the malt come through, and indeed you should be able to get the characteristics of the malt come through in the beer, but IPAs and West Coast style IPAs in particular are all about the hop. It is all about the hop. If a standard IPA is all about the hop, the West Coast takes that and turns the dial up to 11. It just does. This did not have anywhere near enough hop presence to kick it up into upper echelon territory. That being said, it was tremendously well balanced as an IPA and indeed as a beer. So that I gave it the score that I did really does give you a hint to how well balanced it was. It just wasn't hop forward enough for me, so I had to dock points. I gave it an 8 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible. If you tell me that you're brewing a West Coast style IPA, you've got my attention. It's my favorite beer style of them all, period. I love a ton of beer, and there are tons of my favorite beer styles, but this is the top of the mountain for me. West Coast style IPA, that is the hophead's dream beer style and subcategory. This just did not have the hop potency. I really didn't even think there was that much in common with a standard West Coast style IPA. It just wasn't hop forward enough. It didn't have enough bitters. It didn't have enough hop presence. It was well balanced. If this were a standard IPA, just here's an IPA, I probably would have said, yeah, that's great. But you're going to tell me it's West Coast and then have it kind of fall on its face for the style? For me, I was underwhelmed. I was expecting hop glory, and I got hop light. But as it were, the beer was still so good that I gave it the high end of average. I gave it a 6. Finally, as an example of the style, I enjoyed the beer. But again, we're talking the king daddy of hophead subgenre styles of IPAs, the West Coast. It's the biggest, boldest, most intense, the most hop aromatic, the most hop flavor forward, and the biggest amount of bitters. And this just didn't deliver on that sub-style. I still really enjoyed it, and it was still a very good beer, but for the subcategory, I had to dock some points. So I gave it a 6 for the example of the style, high end of average. That brings total score on Outta Line to a 70 out of 100. So this is an above average beer. It's an above average West Coast style IPA, but there are many, 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 many other offerings out there that I would go for over this one. But don't get me wrong, not a bad beer. If you like a tamer beer and you get scared by the fact this says West Coast, I wouldn't be. It's very approachable. It's a good beer. Moving on to number 2. This is the 6 hop IPA at 6.66% ABV. This was not touted to be a West Coast style IPA, but as we delve in, we'll see how this had a heck of a lot more in common with the subgenre than the first one that claimed to be. The aroma on this was quite nice, and as I suspected, it didn't come through super pungently when I was first going after it because that head was so thick and pillowy. It just was trapping the aroma down, and even breathing in deeply right in the glass, you could smell it, but it wasn't pungent. Once I had a few sips and took several minutes and the beer settled itself down, the aroma really came through, and it was certainly above average. I gave it an 8 out of 10. Taste on this, the taste absolutely blew me away. This was so hop forward and so bitter forward. I was just absolutely thrilled, especially on the heels of a disappointing West Coast style offering. This, of the two, I would categorize as a West Coast style IPA. This has a heck of a lot more going for it for the style than this one did that claims to be. it was a hop lover's dream. It was pungent hop aroma, it was pungent hop flavor, and it was bitter, bitter, bitter hop forward. You could still taste the malt bill, but the hop was the star of the show, as it should be. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10 for the taste. Body on this, slightly lower ABV, but the body on this was actually even a bit more robust. I was really taken back by how large and just present the body was in this beer. It was medium heavy, bordering on heavy, and at 6.66, that's a heck of a feat. I give it a perfect 10 out of 10. Mouthfeel on this, absolutely lush and creamy, as though it were poured off of a tap, and then you pair that with some nice viscosity base in the beer. It was a recipe for perfection from a mouthfeel perspective, and I gave it a 10 out of 10. Finish on this was as long as any classic hop-forward West Coast IPA that I've ever had. Those alpha acids and those hop oils just lingered around the palate, and the flavor just kept going and going and going. Ridiculously long, beautiful finish. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Head and retention, just as with the Outta Line, it formed a really lush, beautiful, creamy head. This one actually had even greater staying power than the prior. I give it a perfect 10 out of 10. Appearance-wise, this was similar to the Outta Line, and it fell in the realm of those kind of caramelly colored IPAs, which are a slight deviation from the norm. They're in the range, but there's not that many on the darker end. It's not the ideal color spectrum. But it wasn't as dark as this. It wasn't as dark as an Imperial, though it was getting close. I docked one fewer points than I did on the Outta Line. I gave it a 7. For the balance on this one, this was a masterclass in how to balance an IPA, particularly if you're going for a West Coast style. I don't know if that was their intent or a happy accident, but that's exactly what they produced in this beer. Hop, 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 hop. That's the recipe. They followed it to the letter, and they absolutely nailed it. The malts came through, you could still taste them, but it was kind of a subset of the characteristics of this beer. It was hop aroma, it was hop flavor, it was alpha acids, it was just big, bold bitters, hop, 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 as it should be. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Filling in the intangible, you may have already guessed, and you're right. I gave it a perfect 10 out of 10. I absolutely loved it. Home run of a beer. Finally, as an example of the style, if this were a West Coast style intentionally, I would give it a 10 out of 10. As it were, they didn't categorize it as a West Coast, and that makes the beer even more special in my eyes. It gets a 10 out of 10. I've said this many, many times. There are many, many different substyles of IPA, but the IPA is a beer style that was born out of the hop. It was a happy accident how it was created, and I've mentioned this in several different videos, and I'm sure I will again in the future at some point, but without diatribing, this is exactly how and what an IPA should be for my money. The hop was the star of the show, and it was executed masterfully. Perfect 10 out of 10. That brings the total score on the 6 Hop IPA to a 95 out of 100. That is a ridiculously high score, and absolutely representative of what this beer did well and what it brought to the table. If you're a massive hop head and like big, bold, hop forward, bitter IPAs, I can absolutely recommend this one 100%. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I sincerely appreciate you tuning in. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. And if you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live to YouTube, just click the notification bell next to the subscribe button. It will let you know right when our videos go live to YouTube, so you won't miss any of our content. Till next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.